The difference between what constitutes a right? What is a right? Where do your rights come from? Let me start off by saying your rights don't come from government. The government doesn't grant you rights. Your rights come from God. And that has to be, if they don't come from God, then you don't have any rights. Because just as arbitrarily as a government can decide what your rights are, they can arbitrarily decide what your rights aren't. And that can change day to day, week to week, year to year, administration to administration. Who cares? It doesn't matter. No, your rights come from God because your rights are unchanging. A right is something each human possesses by virtue of being created in the image of God. And that's the best way I can give a definition to it. Now, it's important to understand here that what Bernie's talking about and what Joe are talking about are goods. And there's a huge problem when we conflate rights with goods. Goods are not rights, and rights are not goods. So, like I said, a right is something each human possesses by virtue of being made in the image of God. A good is something produced by the labor of someone, their money, or a service. So if your right depends on someone else's service or work or their money, well, then it's not a right, it's a good. So while the right to an education, the right to healthcare sound like really nice things, they violate the very concept of God-given unalienable rights. You have the right to not be prevented from receiving healthcare or prevented from receiving a good education, but you don't have a right to that education or a right to that healthcare because that depends on someone else's labor to give you that thing. So if I'm forcing you to do labor for me, well, there's a word for that. It's slavery, possibly indentured servitude. The minute something becomes the product of someone else's labor, plain and simple, it's a good, it's not a right. You always have a God-given right to your own goods. You do not have a God-given right to someone else's goods. And you don't even have a constitutional right to those things either. What's going to happen if you conflate rights with goods is that you will enslave some men all of the time or all men some of the time. Period.